show the very fact that this conflict in the Middle East originated in the halls of the Vatican. Now, Hamas.
Okay.
In the United States, we are being told that they are evil, terrible, wicked people that need to be destroyed, and that we should put our funds towards funding Israel to blot Hamas from the face of the earth. Hamas is the enemy. Hamas is the evil one. Now that's what we're being told. And in Pastor Batchelor's video on Israel and the violence in the Middle East, he quoted in Genesis chapter 6, in talking about Noah's flood, where the Bible says in verse 13, God said to Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Now the word for violence in Genesis 6:13, the word is Hamas.
Oh, wow.
That's right. And so the word for violence, Hamas, means violence. And Pastor Batchelor pointed that out. Now, where did Hamas come from? You know, we just simply accept at face value, here is a militant, violent, terroristic group of people, fanatics among the Muslim community. Now, are we painting that all Muslims are bad? Of course not. Of course not. I have met so many godly, sincere Muslim people who are not influenced by the hateful rhetoric that is promoted in Hamas. Now, in Paul Williams's book, it's called Operation Gladio.
Excellent book.
Excellent book. Paul Williams, a former Roman Catholic, writes in this book that following World War II, the CIA that was newly founded by a devout Roman Catholic, a Knight of Malta by the name of Wild Bill Donovan. Originally, the CIA was known as the OSS, or the Office of Secret Service.
So, and it was meant to be temporary, right? It was, when it was created, it was always intended to be temporary and only for the uses of the purposes of the time.
Absolutely.
Okay. So interesting, it became a permanent structure.
Oh, it did. Wild Bill Donovan, the Knight of Malta, the primary place where he recruited heavily for the CIA was Fordham University. Fordham is one of the preeminent universities in the United States of the Jesuit order. And the Jesuit order's entire purpose for existence, twofold. Restore the Vatican to control of the world, and to destroy the Protestant Reformation. Those were the people that were selected to make up the OSS under the leadership of Knight of Malta, Wild Bill Donovan. Now, in order to become the head of the CIA, which it eventually became, Bill Donovan was actually blessed by Pope Pius XII. He was blessed for his mission, which would indicate very clearly for us that while Bill Donovan and the creation of the OSS CIA This was to be a Roman Catholic agency. What was its purpose? It was to do the dirty work of murder, assassination, creating insurrection and rebellion in nations. The very first thing that Paul Williams brings out is that the CIA, right towards the end of World War II, they feared the spread of communism. So Donovan hired what they called gladiator units, or they were called gladios. And he did that in many different countries across Europe. The goal was to stop the spread of communism. How would Donovan fund it? The U.S. government would not fund the CIA. They gave them very little money, Williams points out. Well, what Bill Donovan and his cronies did was they used the Shan Plateau in Burma to have so many kilograms of heroin produced in Southeast Asia. And it was through the sale of those drugs, primarily in the major cities of the United States. It was through drug money that the CIA was funded. Now, come down about 20, 25, 30 years after the end of World War II. There was another thing going on in the world in the 70s into the 80s, and that was communism wanted to spread now into the Middle East. Because Shan Plateau in Burma, because of drought, could no longer produce the poppies as they had previously. So an area was found in Afghanistan whereby the drug money could continue to flow for the CIA, the Catholic Intelligence Agency. Well, the CIA started looking for groups of people whom they could hire and fund and train to protect their interests in Afghanistan and throughout the Middle East. One of the groups that the CIA founded and funded with drug money was called ISIS. Another group that the CIA funded was called Hezbollah. And a third group that they funded and armed was a group called Hamas. Friends, you need to get this book, Operation Gladio. This former Catholic, Paul Williams, has laid out the information so clearly that Hamas was funded and still is being funded. The people are given weapons. They are housed, clothed, fed by the Catholic Intelligence Agency. So where does Hamas come from? They are an organization, friends, controlled by the Catholic Intelligence Agency, which answers directly into the haunting inner corridors of the Vatican itself. Hamas is a Vatican entity being used to create terror in the Middle East.
Quite interesting when you put all this together, too. So what you're saying here is that these terrorist organizations in the Middle East, they are funded directly they're funded and created and trained and given weapons and everything, essentially by the CIA through drug money from the Southeast and even parts of Afghanistan now. So the fentanyl crisis can be laid at their feet too. And when you look at their roots and their origins, you see that they are nothing short of counter-Reformation Jesuits in disguise that make up the body, heart, and soul of the CIA. And quite interestingly is the drug trade usage, because we know from another study, and I don't want to go there necessarily right now, but if you look at the behind the door about Skull and Bones, you'll find that the Roman Catholic Church system used the Illuminati to create the Skull and Bones, which is a chapter of the Brotherhood of Death or Thule Society in Germany. And they did the same thing. They used drug money, in particular opiates, from Southeast Asia and China. They used that money in order to fund their enterprises, which are usually coup d'etat. And unironically, or perhaps ironically is the word I mean, they were one of the direct funders of Mao Zedong and his communist regime. So here you have them working both sides. They're anti-communist and they're pro-communist. They're on both sides of the issue.
Absolutely.
And it's quite interesting because there was a podcast with Lex Friedman's podcast. I don't know if you know who that is, but Lex Friedman's podcast he had on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that one of his things that he was very nervous about was the CIA's involvement with COVID and with the CDC back in 2020, because he knows firsthand, because of what's happened to his family. He stated on that podcast and in other podcasts as well that the CIA is responsible for no less than upwards of 70 plus coup d'etats around the entire world. Mm-hmm. And quite interestingly, something that a lot of folks need to know is that there was an intelligence breakdown when Hamas attacked Israel. Actually, Egypt tried to inform, because Egypt's intelligence tried to inform Israel of the attack days prior, and it fell upon deaf ears. So it seems like someone up in the upper echelons on Israel's side also knew about this attack and did nothing. And meanwhile, they're now releasing press conferences in which I'm going to show you a clip real quick of the Central Intelligence Agency having an intelligence breakdown where they didn't see the Hamas terrorist attacks coming, and they don't know what happened.
Michael McFaul, who's a member of Congress, who's been really, he's Mr. National Security, is saying that this was just a massive, massive intelligence failure to the tune of September 11th. September 11th was a massive intelligence failure. Now, that leads to a lot of other questions, but here, have a listen.
We heard from the administration. There seems to have been a failure of intelligence as well. We're not quite sure how we missed it. We're not quite sure how Israel missed it. We know that Egypt had warned the Israelis 3 days prior that an event like this could happen. We know that this had been planned perhaps as long as a year ago. The other concern...
So Egypt was warning Israel about this. Israel didn't take action. What's going on? I mean, I'm starting to get 9/11 vibes here, right? Where there were all these flashing red light warnings and nobody did anything.
So as you can see from that clip, Egypt warned Israel, and probably Mossad was warned as well. And the American intelligence agency admitting in a press conference that they should have known about it, but had some kind of intelligence breakdown. Similar to their intelligence breakdown that happened during the 9/11 attacks and how they didn't see that coming, and similar to the intelligence breakdown that we found out many decades later that happened during the attacks on Pearl Harbor. There was all these attacks have one thing in common. They should have known in advance, but they didn't. And there was a breakdown of the Central Intelligence Agency, or the intelligence community altogether. And then when we put it all together, when we put all the pieces together, it makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. The reason why those warnings fell upon deaf ears, the reason why there was an intelligence breakdown, is because Rome wanted those attacks to happen. Absolutely. She funded those attacks, and she's ultimately responsible for those attacks.
Absolutely, Cody. This information is heartbreaking because you have Israeli men, women, children, elderly people. They're pawns. They're pawns in this game of international terrorism that is emanating from the Vatican. And, Pope Francis cries out for peace. The Bible says he's a murderer. He's a mass murderer. And, to now see the rhetoric just heating up and boiling over as both sides are engaged in this slaughter. It's a slaughter, Cody. It's a genocide of human life. And it's just heartbreaking.
It is.
It's heartbreaking.